Her laugh was louder than I remembered. Sharp, almost rehearsed. Like she needed to be heard. I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the swirl of cream spiral in silence. 2 tables over, her wine glass caught the overhead light just enough to make it sparkle like the ring she wasn't wearing tonight. She hadn't seen me. She wouldn't. That was the point. The man sitting across from her wore a watch more expensive than my truck. His hand grazed hers every few minutes like they had no idea they were in public, or maybe they didn't care. His shirt was too crisp, his voice too smooth. The way she looked at him. I'd seen it before, but never for me. She leaned in again, her back arching just enough to press her shoulder toward him. His lips moved, whispering something. She covered her mouth to laugh. Her eyes lit up in a way they hadn't at home in months. I folded the receipt the waiter left me into a square. Then another. Then once more into a tiny cube. Slipped it into my coat pocket like it was something sacred. My pulse hadn't slowed in half an hour. She was wearing the green dress I thought she lost. I'd asked about it last month. She said she donated it. I nodded then. I believed her. The truth is I believed everything. Until tonight. He said something that made her gasp. She touched his face. His face. A casual swipe of her thumb across his cheek like it was muscle memory. Like she did it all the time. My throat burned. I watched her lips form the words. He's clueless. And then. He thinks I'm out with coworkers. The word coworkers was the nail in it. That was the lie she told me. Right down to the names. She even listed them. Ginny. Marcus. Some girl named Jay. I breathed through my nose. Counted backward from 10. Didn't work. I stood slowly. The chair didn't scrape, too polite for drama. On my way out I passed behind her. She never turned. I stopped for a fraction of a second. Slipped the note gently onto her handbag just beneath the strap. It was handwritten, uneven, no punctuation. I didn't need to yell. Just 6 words. I saw everything. Don't come home. And then I left. Quiet. Unnoticed. Unmissed. The cold hit me the moment I stepped out of the restaurant. It felt cleaner out there, like the air didn't lie to me. I walked 3 blocks before I realized I was still holding my house keys like a weapon. She'll find the note. She'll read it. Maybe she'll look up confused. But I won't be there. And I won't answer when she calls. Because for the first time in our marriage, I finally heard the truth, from her own mouth. I didn't go home. I didn't even go far. I sat in my car across the street for over an hour, engine off, windows slightly cracked, letting the sounds of laughter and forks tapping porcelain drift over the windshield. At some point, they brought dessert. She always said she didn't like sweets after dinner, but apparently that rule had exceptions now. He fed her a piece. I didn't blink. I couldn't. I watched her take his hand as they stood to leave. She didn't even glance toward her purse at first, just followed him out, flushed and floating, as if the world owed her nothing but the warmth of his attention. When she finally did pause to grab her things, I saw her freeze for a second. Just one tiny pause in motion, enough to let me know she'd seen it. The note. The square fold. The handwriting she'd recognize anywhere. She didn't look around. Not once. They stepped out into the street and I ducked just enough to disappear into shadow. My heart should have pounded, but it didn't. It just thudded, low, slow, final. I watched them walk down the block together, his hand at the small of her back like he was claiming something that was never his to take. It wasn't rage I felt. It was relief. Relief that I didn't have to pretend anymore. That I didn't have to smile through the cold dinners and late-night calls from work or wonder why intimacy had become something negotiated like a schedule change. The worst part was that there was no drama. No screaming. No lies unraveling in real time. Just silence. And truth. The kind that doesn't need explanation. I started the engine and drove to the only place that made sense, my brother's workshop on the edge of town. No one was there. Just sawdust, old tools, and the memory of weekends spent building things we never finished. I slid the garage door open and sat on the concrete floor, back against the wall, eyes fixed on nothing. My phone finally buzzed. Once. Then again. Lana, 9:42 p.m. Hey. I found something weird in my bag. Where are you? Lana, 9:44 p.m. Was that you? Please call me. Please. I stared at the messages until the screen dimmed. I didn't respond. At 10:07 she tried calling. I let it ring. Then again at 10:12. That time she left a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. There's something about a voice that makes things harder, and I wasn't ready to hear her say my name like nothing happened. Instead, I thought about the last time we were really happy. Genuinely. I had to dig. It wasn't a recent memory. Maybe that weekend in Vermont 3 years ago. The one where we didn't have cell service and she actually laughed like she used to without effort. I remember we shared a grilled cheese from a food truck and slow danced in a parking lot. That version of her, she doesn't exist anymore. Or maybe she never did. By midnight, I started thinking about what I should do next. Not emotionally, logistically. The mortgage was in both our names. The truck was mine. Most of the furniture was hers. I'd paid off the ring early, too proud to let her know how hard it had been. Another call came in. I didn't answer, but the message she sent after stuck in my throat. Lana, 12:03 a.m. I can explain. Please don't do anything stupid. It wasn't what it looked like. There it was. The beginning of her story. The desperate rewrite. The retelling where I was confused, overreacting, misunderstanding the obvious. The rehearsed phrases, it was innocent, it didn't mean anything, you weren't supposed to see that. But I did. I saw everything. And more than that, I saw what I wasn't to her anymore. I looked around the dark workshop. No pictures. No memories. Just space. Clean, quiet space. And I made a decision. Not out of revenge. Not even from pain. Just certainty. She could keep the excuses. I'd keep the silence. At 1:34 a.m. the power went out in my brother's workshop. It was almost poetic. 1 second I was staring at the buzz of my screen, ignoring another call from Lana, and the next, I was alone with nothing but the sound of old metal shifting in the rafters. No headlights on the road. No voices. Just silence pressing on every wall like the building itself was holding its breath. I didn't move for a while. My hands were cold. Not from the air, but from the weight of clarity that had settled into my bloodstream. That kind of quiet does something to you. It peels off the protective layers you've used for years, routine, denial, compromise. In that moment, I saw our whole marriage stretched out like a timeline, and I couldn't figure out when the rot began. But here's where things changed, where the story stopped being about just her. Because after the blackout, I walked outside just to clear my head. I didn't expect anyone to be there. But parked at the far edge of the lot was a familiar car. A red Subaru I hadn't seen in years. The driver stepped out slowly. My cousin Braxton. The same one who'd canceled our weekend plans that afternoon. He didn't say anything right away. Just stood there with that uncomfortable half-smile people wear when they've been caught in a lie. I hadn't even opened my mouth yet and I already knew. I didn't think you'd actually come out here, he said, hands shoved in his coat pockets. Didn't think you'd be back in town so fast. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My stomach had already started turning. He glanced at the dark windows of the workshop. You know, you're not the only one she's been lying to. And that's when the floor dropped again. It wasn't just one affair. It wasn't just some polished stranger in a restaurant. Braxton looked me in the eye, his face full of guilt, and said the words I never imagined hearing in a lifetime. She came to me first. Months ago. When things got cold between you two. She said she didn't want to feel invisible anymore. I told her no. I swear I did. But then one night she showed up crying, drunk, and he trailed off. I didn't need the rest. I turned around and started walking back toward the workshop, but my legs were weak. My knees felt like they were made of rusted bolts. The kind you try to tighten but only make worse. He followed. Look, I thought you should know. I couldn't keep pretending. I didn't expect her to go find someone else after I said no. But I think she was already looking for someone else to validate the story she needed to tell herself, that you'd given up on her. That you were done trying. I gritted my teeth. And what did you tell her? He exhaled. I told her that if she wanted to burn her life down, I wouldn't be the match. That was supposed to make me feel better. It didn't. That was the moment I realized it was never just about one betrayal. It was about the story she created behind my back. The image of me she sold to others, that I didn't care, that I didn't try, that I wouldn't notice. And maybe that was the worst lie of all. Because once you plant that seed in someone else's mind, it grows. It spreads. And before you know it, you're the villain in a narrative you never wrote. When Braxton left, I sat in the workshop again, this time shaking not from sadness, but from something else. Something colder. Disgust. Because I remembered a detail. Something I hadn't connected until now. Last year, Lana had organized a surprise birthday dinner for Braxton. She told me to stay home because it was just cousins and people from his side of the family. She even brought him a custom gift I didn't recognize. A pocket knife engraved with coordinates. Coordinates I'd looked up once. They pointed to a cabin on the edge of Sand Hollow Lake. The same cabin she told me she hated visiting. The same one she swore she'd never set foot in again. Now I knew why. She wasn't hiding an affair. She was manufacturing an exit. The next morning, before the sun touched the skyline, I drove to the lake. I didn't know what I expected to find at Sand Hollow, but the idea had already planted itself in my head like a dare. If the coordinates on Braxton's birthday gift matched the cabin, and if she had been there behind my back, I had to see it for myself. I had to know how far this thing went. The road was half frozen. Trees hung over like spectators. When I reached the turnoff toward the lakefront cabins, I slowed down, my eyes scanning the rows of weathered driveways until I saw the number. Number 218. That was it. The one she claimed made her uneasy. The one that supposedly held too many bad childhood memories. Except now I knew it wasn't fear she'd felt here. It was intimacy. It was secrecy. Parked. Got out. The cabin looked unoccupied. Dead leaves blown against the steps. Shutters slightly askew from wind. But when I stepped onto the porch, the doormat had a fresh indentation. Not deep enough for a boot, but maybe for heels. I knocked once. Waited. Nothing. I don't know what possessed me, but I tried the handle. It opened. The inside was warm. Someone had been here recently, maybe yesterday, maybe this morning. The scent hit me first. Lavender and pine. Exactly the kind of cheap candle Lana used to burn when she wanted to create a relaxing mood. I stepped inside slowly, eyes scanning the room, and there on the coffee table was a glass. Lipstick on the rim. Not hers. Next to it, a crumpled receipt from a wine shop in town. And beside that, a torn photo. One corner missing. But the part that remained was enough. It was her, Lana, laughing in the passenger seat of someone's car. Sun on her face, hand covering her mouth like she'd just been caught doing something she wasn't supposed to. My stomach twisted. It wasn't Braxton's car. I backed away from the table like it had teeth. My mind started racing, not with pain this time, but calculation. Pattern. This wasn't spontaneous betrayal. This was her design. Each step, constructed, justified, practiced. I left the cabin and locked the door behind me. I didn't know who had a key, but I figured they'd be back. I didn't care. I had what I came for, confirmation, more than I ever wanted. And on the drive back, I couldn't stop playing her voicemail over and over in my head. It wasn't what it looked like. Then what was it? What do you call it when someone actively deletes you from the narrative of their life, piece by piece? What is the word for when you become a ghost in your own marriage? When I got home, yes, I went back to our house. It was still quiet. She hadn't returned. Her car wasn't in the driveway. My keys still worked. The bedroom looked untouched, but the closet told a different story. Half her clothes were gone. The suitcase we used on our trip to Glacier National Park last year was missing. So was the spare toothbrush. No goodbye. No confession. Just absence. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally opened the last message she'd sent me. One I'd ignored while I was at the cabin. Lana, 2:19 a.m. You don't have to forgive me, but I think you already knew. I was just the first one to act. I read it 4 times. She was right. I did know, but I didn't want to believe it. I always thought betrayal came like a thunderclap. Sudden, jarring, loud. But the worst kind doesn't make noise at all. It grows in silence. It speaks in normal mornings and forced smiles and, "I'm just tired" excuses. That day I started packing, not out of anger, but clarity. Because Lana hadn't just broken a vow. She had rewritten who I was behind my back. She made me into someone I never agreed to be. The inattentive, unambitious, emotionless husband who just didn't get her anymore. She rehearsed that story long before the first glass of wine with her mystery man. Long before Braxton. Long before Sand Hollow. And that made me realize something even colder than betrayal. She didn't just cheat on me. She replaced me. By nightfall, the only thing left in our house that still felt like mine was a framed photo by the front door. It was taken 4 years ago. I'd forgotten who snapped it. Probably her sister at that fall festival in Marion. But there we were, frozen in time. Me holding a caramel apple like a fool, her draped on my arm like she meant it. I almost didn't recognize the way she looked at me in the picture. I had to study it. Was she really in love back then? Or was that smile just another mask she knew how to wear? I left the frame on the entry table. Didn't take it with me. I didn't want to carry something that had become more fiction than memory. After packing the basics into my truck, tools, winter gear, files from the garage safe, I headed for a motel outside town. The kind that smells like old air and would varnish, with a humming soda machine outside that always takes your dollar and gives you nothing back. I sat on the edge of the motel bed scrolling through old photos on my phone. Not because I missed her, but because I needed evidence, some thread that could help me stitch this madness into something that made sense. What I didn't expect to find was him. There he was. In the background of a photo from 6 months ago, some random birthday party for one of Lana's coworkers. I hadn't noticed before, but he was there, near the grill, holding a drink, talking to someone I didn't recognize. Same jawline. Same wristwatch. Same smug posture. She'd brought him into our world. Not just restaurants or cabins. He was at our backyard gatherings, breathing our shared air, laughing with people who used to call me family. That realization gutted me in a new way. This wasn't just a hidden affair, it was embedded. Intentional. She was planting roots for a future she'd already chosen long before I ever noticed she stopped saying we in her plans. I zoomed in on his face. The app tagged him automatically. Darren Maddox. I froze. The name meant nothing at first until I remembered where I'd seen it. Not in my phone. Not in any texts. But in a file folder in the garage safe. One of my old project contracts. He wasn't just some stranger. He had hired me last year to install shelving and a reclaimed barnwood wall in a downtown loft. The job had been forgettable. He paid in cash, tipped high, and didn't say much. But now it clicked. The loft had been nearly empty. No real furniture. Just a few pieces of luggage in the corner. No toothbrush in the bathroom. No mail. Like someone was preparing it, not living in it. And Lana, she'd made a comment once, in passing. You should decorate like that place in the city. That one you did for the bachelor guy with the dark walls. At the time, I thought nothing of it. But now it sickened me. She'd been there. Not accidentally. Not secretly. Casually. I opened my files, dug out the original contract. It was still there. Darren's number, email, his handwritten note about the flooring quote. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I called the number. It rang once. Then again. And then a voice answered. Cool. Calm. Unapologetic. Hello? I paused. Is this Darren Maddox? There was silence for half a second, then who's this? You know who this is, I said quietly. You've been seeing my wife. Another pause. Not long. Not defensive. Then, shockingly, he said my name. Irvin, right? I went completely still. He knew my name. I figured you'd call eventually, he added. I'm not going to lie. I didn't expect you to find out the way you did, but I'm not going to pretend I regret it either. You knew she was married. I did. And you didn't care? He exhaled, slow. You should probably ask yourself why she didn't. I don't know what I was expecting. Guilt? Denial? Some desperate scramble to make himself the victim? Instead, I got a man who had already written me out of the picture. A man who believed he had already won. And in that moment, something inside me finally settled. It wasn't sadness. Or rage. It was this strange, almost surgical acceptance that the version of me she'd been describing to him, that passive, distracted, flavorless man, wasn't someone I ever intended to be. But I had let her say it. I had let her build that version of me out of my silence and absence. No more. I hung up without another word. This time, I would be the one rewriting the story. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. I lay on the thin mattress of the motel bed, staring at the ceiling fan ticking like a slow metronome. The sounds outside the window were distant, someone pacing on gravel, a muffled television, the whine of an engine that came and went, but none of it registered. All I could hear was Darren's voice in my head, calm and steady, like he wasn't the villain in anyone's story. Like I had no part in the outcome at all. And maybe that was the worst part. The indifference. At 4:12 a.m. I sat up and reached for my boots. I had one last place I needed to go before the sun came up, a place Lana never thought I'd return to. Her mother's house. It wasn't just a guess. It was a memory. Years ago, when we were still dating, I picked her up from that same driveway after a fight with her mom. She was sobbing into her sleeve, telling me she couldn't live with a woman who kept digging through her past like it was a storage closet. That was the night I first held her for real. Not because I wanted to fix her, just because I didn't know what else to do. And now, years later, I pulled into that same driveway, headlights off, watching the porch light flicker with age. The curtains were drawn. The mailbox was slightly ajar. A car I didn't recognize was parked halfway on the grass. I walked up to the porch, expecting to turn around. But then I saw something tucked between the screen door and the frame. A letter. Handwritten. Unsealed. I took it. Read the name. It wasn't addressed to her mother. It wasn't addressed to Darren. It was addressed to someone named Ellis. The name didn't ring any bells. I stepped back toward the truck, heart thumping, the letter still in my hand. I knew I shouldn't open it. But instinct has its own morality, and at that moment, the rules didn't apply. So I read it. The handwriting was Lana's, elegant, measured, the kind she used when she wanted to be taken seriously. Ellis, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't say it out loud. I didn't expect you to still be here. Not after everything. But if you are, then please know this. I'm not running because of Irvin. I'm running because I never stopped fearing you'd show up again. That you'd pull me back into the version of myself I tried to bury. I told Irvin pieces of the truth, but never the whole thing. He never knew who I really was before him. But you did. You saw what I did to people when I wanted to disappear. Don't come looking for me. Not again. I read it twice. Then a third time. It didn't make sense. Who the hell was Ellis? And what did she mean by the version of herself she buried? That's when I realized I hadn't lost Lana to Darren. Not really. Darren wasn't the reason. He was just another station she stopped at along the way. She'd been running long before she met me, and whatever she was running from wasn't about love, or loyalty, or marriage. It was about identity. And I was just a chapter she tried to rewrite. I stood there with the letter trembling in my hand, cold crawling up my spine, the smell of old wood and dry leaves filling my lungs. I thought I was reaching the end of the story. That the betrayal had a face, a name, a reason. But instead, I was staring into the beginning of something I never asked to uncover. I folded the letter, slid it into my jacket, and walked back to my truck. If she was lying to Darren. If she was hiding from Ellis. If I didn't even know who she'd been before me. Then what had I actually lost? Not a partner. Not a wife. But a stranger who wore the mask of a soulmate. And the scariest part wasn't what she did. It was that I let her. The next morning, I sat in the truck outside a diner that hadn't updated its wallpaper since the 70s. I hadn't ordered anything. Just sat there, the letter still in my jacket pocket, my thoughts racing in circles. Lana hadn't just betrayed me emotionally or physically, she'd lied on a level I hadn't even thought to check. There was another life hidden beneath ours. A deeper one. Older. And the name Ellis was the key to unlocking it. So I did something I never imagined doing. I called her mother. We hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years. Lana said she didn't want me getting caught up in family drama, and I listened like a fool. But now I needed answers. The phone rang 5 times before the voice picked up. Hello? Her voice was thinner than I remembered, worn down by either time or regret. Maybe both. It's Irvin, I said. Silence. Then, a tired sigh. I figured I'd hear from you sooner or later. I need to ask you something. About Lana. About her past. About someone named Ellis. Another pause. Then, where did you hear that name? She left a letter for him. At your place. I read it. Her voice dropped to a whisper. She promised me he was gone. I clenched the steering wheel. Who is he? There was movement on her end. Maybe she sat down. Maybe she reached for a cigarette. I remembered she always did when the truth got uncomfortable. Ellis wasn't just someone she knew, she said carefully. He was someone who shaped her. Back when she lived in Asheville. Before she met you. Before she even moved upstate. I thought she grew up in Vermont. She did. But she left for North Carolina when she turned 21. She wanted to start over. That's what she called it. She met Ellis through a group she was involved with, a kind of underground therapy circle. They weren't licensed. They called themselves a reclamation collective. Said they helped people reclaim the identity they lost through trauma. I felt a chill run through me. She was with them for 2 years. And when she came back, she was different. Calmer. Quieter. She never talked about what happened there, but she made me swear never to mention it to anyone she got close to. Especially not if she ever got married. My throat was dry. Why? Because Ellis didn't let people go. Not really. When she left, she didn't just ghost him. She took something. Records, journals, files, things that exposed how manipulative that group was. She told me if he ever found her again, she'd disappear for good. I looked out the windshield, eyes unfocused. Everything I thought I knew about her unraveled by the second. She told me once, her mother continued, that love was only safe when nobody really knew you. I thought she was just being dramatic, but I think she meant it. The call ended quietly. I didn't say goodbye. I just sat there, the hum of the engine ticking under my feet. Lana's secret life unfolding like an infection under clean skin. It made sense now. Why she always kept parts of herself behind glass. Why she was warm but never raw. Why she flinched when I asked about the years before we met. Why she always over-explained things that didn't need explanations and said almost nothing about things that did. She was building a version of herself I could love, but not one that could survive honesty. I drove straight to the city library after that, found a back table in the archives room and pulled out my laptop. I started searching every digital thread I could. Asheville, reclamation, Ellis, collective, identity recovery. And after nearly 2 hours of scrolling past garbage forums and clickbait articles, I found it. A blog post from 2016, titled, "The Man Who Told Me I Wasn't Broken, Just Misaligned," written by someone named Carly B. The opening paragraph mentioned a man named Ellis who led emotional deconstruction retreats. The tone was worshipful, like he had saved her, or brainwashed her. But buried in the comments, anonymous, almost missed, was one that changed everything. Anonymous. He doesn't fix people. He reprograms them. I escaped too. Her name wasn't Carly when she joined. It was Lana. That comment was 6 years old. 6 years. It meant she had joined under her real name, left, changed, and kept that mask all the way through our first date, our wedding, our anniversaries, our life. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred, because that's when I realized the most horrifying truth of all. I wasn't the first man she disappeared from, and I might not be the last. I didn't go looking for her after that. Not because I didn't want closure, but because I finally understood. There wasn't a version of Lana that was ever meant to stay. She hadn't just left me. She'd left herself long before I ever met her. And once I let that truth settle, something shifted inside me. The weight of it stopped pressing against my ribs. The shame, the confusion, the endless questions of what did I miss? And why wasn't I enough? They went quiet, not gone, but quieter, like waves finally pulling back from a storm-soaked shore. I stayed in that motel for another 3 days, long enough to clear my name off the joint accounts. Long enough to have the locks changed on the workshop and move my remaining tools into a storage unit. I spoke to a lawyer, not for revenge, just to make sure I'd never have to share a signature with someone who'd built a second life under mine. And then I left town, not forever, but for a while. A friend of mine who runs a woodshop up in Michigan offered me a guest cabin and temporary contract work. Said the lake up there was still half frozen and the air was clean enough to start over with. I took it, no questions asked. The drive up was slow. I took back roads, slept in rest stops, ate gas station sandwiches that tasted like salt and forgetting. I didn't bring much with me, just what I needed. And the letter, not hers, mine. I had written it the morning I left, folded it once, left it on the nightstand of the motel room. It wasn't addressed to her. It wasn't even addressed to anyone, really. It just said this: you are allowed to begin again, even if no one explains why you had to start over, even if the goodbye you deserved never came. I didn't write it as closure for her. I wrote it as a reminder to myself that not all endings are answers. Some are exits. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk out the door quietly and never look back. The work up north was simple, honest. Each day I built something small. A cedar bench, a pine frame, a cradle for a man expecting twins. My hands remembered the rhythm before my mind did. And slowly, the noise of everything else began to fade. I met people. Not many. Just enough. One of them was a woman named Nora. She wasn't loud or flashy or asking me to be anything but present. We shared coffee a few times. Laughed about stupid things like how her car door sticks in the cold. She never asked what brought me there, and I never asked why she always wore her hair tied back like she was hiding a secret. We both respected silence. Maybe that was enough. I don't know what happens next. I'm not rushing to define it. But I know this. I survived the kind of betrayal that tries to rewrite who you are. I stared at the hollow center of someone I thought I knew, and I didn't break. More than that, I didn't become bitter. I became clear. I see now that the person who left me wasn't escaping me. She was escaping every version of herself she couldn't control. And I just happened to be in the way when she slipped the mask back on. So I let her go. And in doing that, I found something better than closure. I found peace. The kind that doesn't need explanations. The kind that tastes like quiet mornings and coffee you make just for yourself. The kind that comes not when you win, but when you stop needing to.